Hello and welcome to this ISM webinar, Breaking into the Music Industry. I'm Ella, Events Coordinator and Member Engagement Officer at the ISM. And for the purpose of accessibility, to describe myself, I'm a white woman with brown hair and I'm wearing a red top. So for those of you who don't know, the ISM is the UK's professional body for musicians, and our members come from all areas of the music industry and from a wide variety of genres and musical backgrounds. This includes those who are studying and starting out to those with established careers in the industry. And you can find out a bit more about the ISM and how you could join on our website or hopefully in a chat, in the link in the chat. So today I'm delighted to be words. I'm delighted to be joined by freelance musicians Gabriella Swallow, Rob Spalton and Dominic Lawson. And just before we begin the webinar, I have a few things to note. So please do get to know each other and chat in the chat box. Let us know where you're studying and where you're joining us from. And during the webinar, please feel free to ask questions by using the Q&A function. And in the chat, keep your eye out there for some useful links from Courtney. If you experience any technical difficulties, let us know in the chat box and we'll attempt to resolve these. And if you wish to use them, subtitles are available to enable at the bottom of your screen. The webinar is being recorded and we'll share the recording with you afterwards. Now, I'm very pleased to hand over to Gabby, who is going to be sharing her inspiring journey into the music industry and tips on building a successful career. Thanks, and over to you, Gabby.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be invited on to speak to you all. I can imagine that you've all just sort of started at music college. There's a lot of information that's being given to you. And I just think that already by being here with us, you're going to be fine. This is exactly what you should be doing. It's proactive and it's building up new contacts. But we'll get into that a bit later. So it's just been wonderful to be part of the ISM, first of all. I'm taking over as president next year from the fabulous Nikki Spence, who we're very lucky to have at the moment. And I will start a little bit sort of early career stuff for me. I'm a cellist, and for purpose of accessibility, I'm a white woman, middle-aged, red hair, with blue eyes. So I'm a cellist, I'm a curator, I'm a teacher, and to be honest, I kind of have always crossed lots of genres with my music making. It didn't always start that way. I was born into a sort of semi-musical family, not really. Both my parents were actually dentists. I was born in Belfast during a very, very difficult time in history in the 80s. So I moved over to England when I was about to start at primary school. And my mother was an amateur harpsichord player. And I think I really actually fell in love with Baroque music first as a recorder player, of all things. And as the 80s was quite a big boom for Baroque music, I played a lot and was really into it. But also the recorder, apart from maybe two recorder players, it wasn't ever really celebrated or really given a lot of kind of bandwidth as a potential instrument to carry on to adulthood. So I was encouraged to start string instruments. And I was asked by my parents, which one would you like to play? And I said, the biggest. And my parents had a tiny car. So they lied to me and I chose the cello. So I played the cello, and then when I was kind of 8 years old, I applied for music school in Manchester. I was at Chetham's. It was a really interesting way to start my life at music school because I'd really applied as a recorder player, but they said to me, look, you're gonna, we think you should probably take the cello more seriously. And I hadn't played cello for actually that long. So I started off very much as the underdog, I would say. I didn't have the big kind of musical pedagogue family that a lot of people did. My parents were 3-4 hours away. It was the 90s, so no mobile phones, no contact with home. I was kind of left to my own devices. And I look back at it now, and it was pretty scary because I didn't have any concept of even like how orchestras worked. I'd never really played in one. So I thought that being at the back of the cello section was actually signified being in the bottom of the whole orchestra. I didn't understand the basics about like how desk systems worked or anything. I was really clueless. But it meant that I was a bit of a sponge, and I would go to everything. I would go to every sort of concert, and I didn't sort of know the rules actually. So I would go to the jazz gigs at Bridgewater Hall, well, before it was built, but, Band on the Wall we used to go to a lot. And I was just started getting really interested in contemporary music. And I would say from like 11, 12 years old, just everything that made me feel excited and liberated as a young musician was not kind of the classical harmony. It was always scrunchy chords and interesting things and weird effects. And I just loved from a young age this sort of feeling with an audience of presenting them something new rather than just being the interpreter, which is completely valid, but just I could tell it wasn't completely for me. So being in a music school environment already, when you're not quite feeling the same as other people, was a mixed bag. It felt like something, I felt like a bit of the sort of the sheep, of the black sheep of the family, but also I found it quite exciting because I knew that they didn't quite know what to do with me. So I started just sort of making my own things up and started writing music a lot and collaborating with sort of different musicians from the faculty, not just your usual string quartet, and listening to a lot of different music. And it was 90s, it was Manchester, and it was a really exciting city to be part of. But obviously I was a kid, so couldn't really kind of go out to loads of gigs or anything. But there was definitely a buzz about being there. So it came to music college, and I kind of followed the trajectory that we all did at music school. Like if you were going to go to music college, you dropped an A-level and you auditioned. And I had a quite a difficult time because my best friend, who still is my best friend, is the fabulous Guy Johnston, the cellist who won Young Musician of the Year. And a lot of attention was going on Guy's career, and rightly so. But it meant that I think being in a year with him, I felt that my lessons might have been a bit compromised. So again, I kind of kept doing my own path, and I applied for all the music colleges, and actually wanted to go to America, where the teacher I really wanted was. And there was a kind of a mix-up. He decided to stay in America because he was going to teach at the Royal College of Music. And it's a long story, but anyway, I ended up going to the Royal College of Music and definitely didn't have the teacher I wanted to. So speaking very candidly now, I really struggled for my first year at music college. I found it really, really, really difficult. I found going from 9 years of music school suddenly to an institution in a completely different city. I found it quite isolating. I got lost a lot. This was again way before phones. I feel like so old telling all of this, but we just like literally had maps in our bag. That was how we used to, navigate our way around the city. And I used to sort of end up in different parts of London all the time. And it was really difficult. And the teacher who I went to basically told me to start my technique completely from scratch again. And that was so difficult, I can't tell you. It was difficult because the social element, what you should all be doing at music college, of course, is playing, and playing with many different groups and people as possible. And there I was just playing scales all the time in a practice room by myself. Thoroughly depressed, really, and found that really hard, especially coming from music school. So I actually started sort of moonlighting, in the sense that there was before social media, we had a physical paper called Loot, where people would put adverts in looking for musicians. And I joined Loot and answered an advert in 1999 asking for a cellist for an indie band. And so I went to Finsbury Park, and it was really quite dodgy and dangerous back then. And at the end of this road was this indie band that kind of slightly auditioned me. And I can kind of honestly say that's kind of where things really got exciting for me, because where my colleagues at music college were all kind of having these incredible symphonic experiences or string orchestra, I was there in this band pretty much every week rehearsing the same 3 or 4 songs, but being made to feel really good about myself, about my playing, what I could do, all the transcription I'd learned at music school because I did composition a lot. And I found that whole experience kind of liberating, really. But I definitely didn't tell anyone at the Royal College of Music I was doing that, far from it. So to cut a long story short, at the end of the year, I thought I was going to leave the college and transfer to America, where the original teacher I wanted was going to teach me. But then they found this really great teacher, and I decided to swap in the same year that I actually played at Ronnie Scott's with this band. And from then on, really, I kept this sort of duality going on. I then started doing incredibly well at the college. I won the concerto trials, the medal, started getting really high marks for my exam after like them kind of really, I think, gave me a very tough time in my first year. I had a really unfair panel, and I remember seeing the politics first of all at music. That was really quite difficult. So after that, I didn't really trust that whole system of being marked or anything. I just kind of wanted to, I was just like sort of there for me. What could I do? So I had a great teacher, and then fully embraced what college had to offer me, but also was building outside. And I think that's a really important point. Started sort of working a bit more in the jazz scene and doing sessions for singer-songwriters. And then my first professional session was very quickly, actually, after I graduated, for Sade. And working with Sade at a very young age, who, I mean, I'm younger than her generation, but I knew what she meant to a lot of people that were older than me. And I remember going into the session kind of being, still a bit snobby because I'd come from this very sort of elitist classical background. And the producer of the track was this amazing producer called Robin Miller, who's actually blind. And he's the most wonderful person. And he started challenging me about sort of what my favorite Shostakovich symphony was. And I remember sort of age 23, I was thinking, I'm learning much more from these guys, than I thought I was. And I really just sort of embraced this session. And it was really interesting working with her because, again, her attention to detail was something I was used to from the classical background, but had gone into it thinking, well, I'm not going to, she's going to think I'm great or whatever. She really didn't. She really pushed me. And that was a real wake-up call. So throughout my 20s, I started really embracing that in contemporary music. And then I got married super young. I had children much younger than I thought I was going to. And then I became a single parent in my sort of late 20s, early 30s. And then again, everything changes. And the reason why I was doing music, I had to completely kind of reflect on and readdress. And my dream of when I started out, probably when I was like 10, 11 years old, of just playing like the Elgar Cello Concerto around the world, it wasn't going to cut it. I had to, basically start from scratch again. And I said yes to absolutely everything. I took more lessons because I'd had some time out, having kids, and really kind of, it was a very humbling experience, to be honest, especially with, a toddler and a very young baby in tow. But built up this incredible community of musicians and friends, and we put on our own concerts, and I got really involved in all the early non-classical events that Gabriel Prokofiev does. And I got a live-in au pair, and I toured, the world, really. I supported Brian Ferry for 3 years, and, and we made it work. My kids would come out on the road with me. And I think I really just embraced all the skills that I'd learned from every aspect, the music school, the music college, the indie bands. And I just thought, well, what makes me me? Because really, it's about you as this individual and your story and all your twists and turns. And really, there's no definitive way of doing it. There's no straight line. Everyone's line is wiggly and warped, and that's the best thing about it. But I think once you're in there and you're in the institutions, we're so programmed to be looking over our shoulder and think, God, that person's got that gig. Why is that person on that desk? And actually, it is really nothing about that in the profession. It's about what makes you stand out and what can you add to the table. And I think that's really, important, an important message, because even if you go into music college thinking one thing, you may come out a whole other musician, and that's completely fine. Being a working musician at the moment in the profession, and I'm sure you've all been maybe given quite negative dialogue about the state of the world and the state of our industry, but there is room, there is space. You just have to be more creative. And actually, your generation have got it way more over than my generation. And a lot of the things, I'm, very honoured to be asked to speak to you. But actually, in a way, it's all your experiences that are going to create the work that you want to, because your experiences are going to be completely different to mine. And that is the beauty of it. So I really, really sort of recommend just keeping this going, but also looking forward, looking out, going to as many gigs as possible, listening to as many different things, supporting your friends. A huge amount of what we do is very, very difficult. And if you find your tribe of musicians at this stage, that's going to last you a lifetime. Some of the best collaborations I've been involved in, I'm in Jess Gillivan's ensemble, for example, and some of her ensembles she was at the Royal Northern with. And that's like, I think really important, because it's these relationships now that you're kind of harnessing and embracing for the future. I'm just going to find, there's a couple of questions that came through about breaking contacts before I finish talking to you. How do you make contacts moving into London? I mean, this is kind of follows on, going to as many gigs as possible, supporting each other, going to jam sessions, whatever the genre of music you're interested in. London, we are so lucky to be here. This is obviously an international, so it's a webinar. There's probably lots of different parts of the country. But anything that you can do really just to play and meet lots of different people, that's really important. How do you stand out from the others? I mean, I think as well, think about kind of being a human, as in like not just a musician. Think about all the other interests you have. There's plenty of really great pianists out there, but there's other things that make a pianist really interesting. Spending time together, having different topics of conversation, like lots of, don't think about just collaborating with other musicians. Think about other art forms, about dancers, hip hop artists, DJs. Don't stay in your box, look out. And then that's always interesting to other people, because that can inspire, even if they don't want to do exactly the same thing as you. It's always about just trying to get inspiration and then inspire other people. I think that's really important. Anxiety about failing, that's come up in the question. I mean, there's no such thing as failure at this stage. Just please have a go. If it's not for you, it's okay. People won't remember your recital from your first term at music college in 20 years' time. You'll be a completely different musician then. Take risks now. It's so important. I massively messed up a recital. I got terrible bow shakes. I was an incredibly anxious person because I had had a massive break after starting my technique again. And it was terrifying. But I learned it, like when you ride off, fall off a horse, you get back on and just keep going, keep practicing, always keep practicing, and keep being in love with the reason why you got into music in the first place. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gabby. And now I'm just going to hand over to Dom, if you could jump on and join us again to hear a bit about how you're building your career. Thanks, Dom.
Hi everyone, my name is Dominic Lawson. For accessibility purposes, I am a black male with an afro, and I'm wearing a grey hoodie and a brown coat, furry coat. Um, so yes, so my start in music began obviously like most of us when we were very young. I had picked up the piano, singing, went to stage school. And then by the time I was in secondary school, I had picked up the saxophone, the clarinet, the flute, and some tuned percussion too. So I was very much, a conservatoire kid. I went to junior conservatoire in Birmingham, um, and later went on to study at the Royal Northern. Um, by the time I was like 13, 14, I was already touring, well, I mean, traveling the world, playing saxophone with the National Saxophone Choir. Um, and very similarly to Gabriella's story, I was very precocious youth. If I saw something that I liked and I wanted to know more about it, I would just go. And I mean, these are the days, I mean, this is like 2004, 2005 time where the internet was around, but it wasn't really like active in the way that it is right now. So I very much went and sought out, I would go to wherever I need to go to, and I would stand in front of the person that's in charge and like, hello, I want to join this group. Um, so I had that attitude from a very young age. And by the time I came to music college, I was already, a pretty seasoned performer in terms of like, I didn't suffer with like nerves and stage fright for a lot of the time, for the vast majority of the time. And I was just very familiar with the kind of the customs of performing, let's say. Um, and when I went to RMCM, I studied the saxophone for undergrad. And I had a pretty rough time at the RNCM in my first couple of years. I didn't get on with my teacher so much, which is always something to consider. It's difficult if you don't get on with your teacher and you feel like, they're having maybe a negative impact on your musical development. Um, and after my second year, I did drop out of college, and I went back home and I was very confused because the saxophone in particular had been something that has been so ingrained into me from a young age, and music. And I thought I was going to go to music college and have this magical kind of high school musical type of, oh my God, everyone loves playing music and we want to play together and have a great time. And that wasn't my story, unfortunately. I didn't really get on with the other students, to be honest, either. So I left, went home, did my own thing, traveled around the world a bit, did some, soul searching. And in that time, I decided that the saxophone maybe wasn't my career path that I wanted to stick to, and I wanted to be a singer predominantly. So with that, I came back to college to finish my undergrad in saxophone, but I came up with a completely different mindset. One, to stand up for myself in what were very uncomfortable situations, and to get my first, because that's what I'm of Jamaican descent, and I have a very militant grandma who was like, "You're going back." So I had no choice but to go and finish my undergrad, which I did, and I got my first, which I was very happy with. And then I went on to study um, a master's in popular music at the Royal Northern as well, and that was the first year of the master's. Um, and that kind of brings me to where I want to start kind of talking about, my career and stuff. I think when I was writing down some notes about what to say today and what to talk about, the overall theme to me was know thyself, know thyself. Things I wish I would have known in first year. Um, the main thing is to know yourself. Um, know what turns you off, what you don't, what you like, what you love, what is hard for you, what requires you to have some extra time, what is your time frame. All these kind of things are really good to start thinking about when you're just starting out and trying to kind of carve out a path for yourself. And when I did come back to college after my year out, Gabriella again touched on this. Is I found my tribe, which I was very, very lucky to, and we were all music students at the time, and we started our own group, which was a brass band. Um, and it was like not like a kind of typical brass band. It was more like it was brass fusion, had saxophones in. I sang with it occasionally. I mean, it's still going now. What, some 12 years later, and we're all best friends. We love working with each other. We work and we make our living. That's our bread and butter, basically. So we do a lot of corporate gigs, a lot of weddings, public gigs too, but mostly like a lot of high-end corporate gigs, private stuff that we get flown around and do all kinds of stuff. And I think one of the things I realized when I came back to music college as well is that, I mean, it's different for every instrument, but the saxophone, especially the classical saxophone, which I was studying, and there was not really much provision for jazz, even though I did have a jazz background. And the culture around it was not, it's not, I mean, even in Manchester now, it's still not really a supported art form the way I would like it to be. Um, but so with that, I decided we have to create our own work. And that's kind of been the theme of my career from then. So we created the brass band, and then in my masters, I made it my mission to shoehorn as much as and get as much out of the college as possible. So in my final, I did my first major project, which was a 40-piece orchestra. I composed everything. I'd arranged and composed all the music. Um, and we had dancers, we had video, we had lighting, and it's very much a multi art form project, and that's kind of the basis of everything that I do right now. Right now, I have an orchestra, a choir, and the brass band are my main sources of income and work. But outside of that as well, I've been working with artists, doing backing vocals, arranging, production. Um, Everything I can think of, really. I mean, everything that this kind of musician umbrella covers. I've done pretty much a bit of everything, um, and that was by choice. That was by choice, and definitely intentionally going there to diversify. Going in to diversify and give myself as much opportunity leaving college as possible. 'Cause I did see on my year out that there wasn't much opportunity for us that was going to be handed to us. Before I finish, I have some questions. How do you know when you found the right people slash person to collaborate with? Um, for me, it was my people in my tribe. We get on really well, which is not always a sign, but I think when you get past the initial figure each other out, can we have a good workflow? Is this person a bit of a yin to your yang, or is this like a really symbiotic, relationship that can develop? Both work. Sometimes I've worked really well with people that I don't like personally. So it's you've got to feel it out and give it time. And then some people, straight away that this is not going to work. But if it's not certain straight away, don't give it up. How would you advise as a young person to balance the need for practice and preparation with taking opportunities of action? If you're starting college right now, you should be practicing every day, anyway. I feel like make it while you have the time, at least 2 hours, of physically practicing your instrument. And a lot of it is mental things to overcome as well, to understand about yourself, about how you practice. Again, know thyself. I think with opportunities, take as many as you can, because I think play if you're performing, if you're producing, if you're songwriting, the opportunity is still you practicing. It's practicing in real time, so but you may stumble in a more public setting. It depends what you're like. If you can handle that kind of thing. If you know you can't, then don't put yourself in that position, I would say. I've got no minutes left.
Fab, thank you so much for sharing, Dom. And now can I hand over to you, Rob, if you could jump on? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rob. I'm a freelance musician and trumpet player, and for accessibility purposes, I'm a white male with short brown hair, a little bit less hair than I'd like, with a little bit of a beard, a little bit more of a beard than I'd like, and I'm wearing a pink top and a checked blue and green jacket. So yeah, I I graduated from the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire in 2014, and since then I've done all sorts. I've worked as a freelance performer, as a teacher, as a conductor, as a brass repairer, as an RAF reservist, and somehow now as a website designer. I've toured extensively and played most UK major festivals, including, you know, your Glastonburys and your Boomtowns, Green Man, WOMAD, and Cropredy Festival, which is to like 20,000 people. I conducted part of the close of the 2018 Commonwealth Games and wrote for and played at the opening of the 2022 Games. And I've played the last 3 major royal state occasions, being, you know, the coronation of King Charles III, Her Late Majesty's funeral, and formerly the Platinum Jubilee. I've done some West End bits and supported the likes of Jason Derulo and Top Loader and The Selector, and even Bob Marley's band The Wailers. And I'm not being funny, I genuinely don't know how any of this has happened. But at Courtney and Ella's request, I've compiled some principles which I really wish someone had kind of told me about in music college as to how to run a successful freelance portfolio career. So sorry if some of these seem obvious, but I think, like I said, I just really wish somebody had told me these years ago. So the first is one, say yes to everything. I was rubbish in music college, very much the underdog, massive performance anxiety. I had a load of technical problems, which I'm still working on. And I've never been a classical trumpet player, despite being on a classical course. You know, I love listening to orchestral rep, but as a trumpet player, it's not that rewarding, really. You sit there for like a million bars and then go ba-bam, and then do some more counting. So in college, I found myself doing loads of other stuff, from big bands, folk ensembles, to function stuff, and even things like being our equivalent to the SU president and student council things. So why is this relevant? Well, when I was studying, there was a really damaging and kind of toxic attitude among students to, I only play it if it's Mahler. I don't know why they speak like that, which really blinkered them to some exciting opportunities on the periphery. Now, I think we all recognise and know that the X Factor, or whatever show you want to call it, it is not a typical career path. You're probably not going to flop out of education into the LSO or another great big orchestra. This sounds like an obvious statement, and yet still in college I see students rejecting opportunities because they're either out of their comfort zone or they feel that they're maybe a little bit too lowbrow. Whereas these in reality could be amazing platforms to network and to learn to play or act in new ways and settings. And what I find really, really sad, and what speaks to how damaging that approach is the vast majority of folks who held that attitude are kind of not really playing at all at the moment. So yeah, the side hustle is everything. Build up the portfolio as much as you humanly can. Second point, networks. Your network is absolutely everything. 80% of your work will come from 20% of your network. So the healthier and the larger that network is, the better your diary is going to look. I always like to link up with people and have kind of play dates in the diary. And in my head, these are loosely kind of formed into 4 groups. First of all, you've kind of got God tier, you've got Zeus level players, folks who are, they're kind of at the pinnacle of their profession and likely already your teachers. They're probably not going to give you any gigs, and that's fine. But then we have the Herculean level, Hercules. These folks are probably a little bit ahead of you in the game, maybe a few years older, but they're more than happy to give you a coffee and blow through some duets or a show pad, and they're probably likely to throw some work your way when they need a dep. So saddle up to them as much as you can. Then you've got your mates who you're probably in constant contact with anyway. Play with them. Might not get you anything now, but in a few years' time, that'll really, really help. And then you've got the other people, the little people, who probably think that you're Hercules. So be nice and make them a coffee, and then fob off your really rubbish gigs to them. That's just how the circle of life works, really. But you're a business. Don't wait for the phone to ring. You've got to get strategic, get tactical, and get really proactive. Yeah, another note on networks is to stay in touch with people. You don't need to go asking for work or anything daft like that, but reconnecting with folks from anything from like a meme to an impromptu pint or a coffee, apart from being a really nice thing to do, can be tactically and selfishly really quite rewarding. Also, where you want to be kind of geographically located is pretty vital. I've seen so many friends move around the country and wonder why the work's all dried up. It's like, well, if you're thinking about moving around the country, make sure you've got bread and butter income where you're going, and think of the ROI, think of the repercussions. What will you lose? Is there certainty you'll gain? Final point on networking. We've talked in the promo of this webinar about kind of breaking into the music industry as if it's some sort of secret club that you only gain access to by meeting the right behatted man. this is like hilariously false. The music industry is all around you now. You know, in 5 years' time, that'll be far more obvious. But embrace the people you're studying with, because they're it. The trick is to meet more people and to stay in touch with them. Make a really good impression. And if you can kind of, you know, if you get a call or a message for an engagement, say yes as fast as you humanly can. Turn up early, be nice, be prepared. This it's not like some sort of weird secret code. It's just common sense. So hey, moving on. Number 3, actively plan. This is really wordy. Actively plan to achieve your goals and then separate them from your values. I'd argue in a complete mirror of what Gabby said so beautifully earlier. Our career trajectory is so much less linear than that of, say, an engineer. It's so much more likely to be fragmented, spinning loads of different plates, loads of different commitments simultaneously. And among all of these, you still need to carve out time for your personal admin, your personal practice, and to plan how to get where you're trying to get to. And here the distinction between goals and values is dead important. You've got to keep sight of those goals on the horizon and acknowledge that while you might be running parallel with some friends now, their goals and yours might be totally different. So if you want to play in the West End, cool. Go and listen to all the West End shows you can, find out who the trumpet chair is on Wicked, drop them a line and take them for a beer. We're really guilty as musicians of waiting for the phone to ring or being kind of too busy to actively pursue our own goals by getting sucked into the day-to-day stuff. So look at your long-term goals and create steps or mini goals, essentially, to get there. Your values, on the other hand, are how you prioritize and how you approach those goals. Your values utterly define you, not your goals. If your goals define your happiness or your sense of success or self-worth, then those things are always in the future and they're not present. And they're likely to be ever-moving goalposts and targets. And I'm really sorry if this sounds a bit preachy, and we'll come back to it a bit later, but it's totally in step with Dom's know thyself thing. It's exactly that. So hey, moving on. Branding, number 4, branding and hats. Some people will tell you urgently need a website and to keep your social media pages really spick and span, but you really don't. Posting every now and again to let people know you're not dead, well, that's good. But in reality, social media, all it does is connect pre-existing networks. So I really hate all that social media stuff, but when I do post, it's always trying to be positive or something that I wouldn't be frustrated to view. And again, getting really tactical about this, you're much more likely to be on the top of someone's, oh, I'll ask them list if they've just seen you playing a really cool gig on Instagram. If you've polluted my feed with your endless whinging about your problems, the last thing I want to do is seal myself in a car with you for like 4 hours. It's just reality. A lot of people these days seem to be buying into this personal branding thing, styling their own look and taking that every conversation you have as an interview point a step further. Now, I don't mind this as long as it feels like an authentic representation of that person, but if you're starting to appear a bit false and a bit vain, folks are going to start feeling like they're being manipulated and are far less likely to kind of forge meaningful bonds with you, which you can either personally or professionally rely on in future. So just be authentic, well, that guy loves wearing hats, rather than he's wearing a hat because he wants me to know that he likes jazz music. We don't like that. Diversify. In college, I figured it would be really impractical to teach and gig on the same day. So I signed up for a brass repair course and bought loads of tools and stuff with gig money, opened a brass repair workshop in Birmingham. And at the same time out of college, I picked up an amazing teaching gig at a Derbyshire school, Repton School, very, very good school. I picked up some absolutely horrendous teaching gigs, we won't talk about those. But it turned out I really, really loved teaching. And within a year or so, I was head of brass there, and I was conducting all the school's ensembles, and it turned out I really loved conducting. So before you know it, I'm musical director of a bunch of community ensembles, teaching loads and gigging loads and then repairing loads in my workshop at home. And then in 2018, disaster struck really, really badly. I was in hospital and I collapsed and ripped my lip open, which as a trumpet player is like, that's not a good thing. That's a really, really bad thing. So it's a miracle I can play the trumpet at all, let alone kind of still to a professional level. But if I didn't have that conducting and that teaching and repairing to fall back to, I'd be totally ruined. So it's not to say you should sell out and go and do something completely different, but it's just to say diversify your income and treat yourself as a business. Protect yourself, as it were. Also on the types of work point, and not dissimilar to that say yes to everything. Honestly, not all music is going to feel like the wonderful artistic experience that we want it to be. Why? Well, probably because your artistically incredible music is probably really niche, and it probably doesn't pay enough or regularly enough or is sustainable enough. So sometimes music's just going to feel like work, and if you're a string player, that's probably going to be Pachelbel's canon. I can imagine that Gabby would agree with that. For everybody else, it's probably Valerie. You know, earning a living with a trumpet on your face is still earning a living, and that should never really feel like, you know, it's selling out. I've walked away from some function gigs with like 500 quid plus, and that's like 4 times the old dep rate for all the major London orchestras. You know, don't quote me on that, but I really hate Valerie. Sometimes it is just work. The trick is to take on what you need to eat, and kind of while giving yourself space to pursue what you want to on an artistic level, or making headway on that career trajectory. So over the years, I've listened to loads of motivational talks and books on psychology and careers and all that stuff, and they all basically say the same thing, which is, what do you really want to do? How are you going to get there? And all right, go and do it, with an emphasis on constant pragmatism and short and long-term goal setting in line with your values. Which brings me neatly on to look after your mental health. We all know that physical burnout is real, sometimes unavoidable, and it's blinking horrible. Mental burnout is substantially worse. And being super transparent, for a long time, I think my sense of self-worth was directly related to both my technical ability on my instrument and how much of what kind of work I had coming in. So being young and ambitious and self-employed, it's really easy to get sucked into a pretty brutal work ethic. You know, if I'm Rob Spalton, the trumpet player, and I'm playing badly, in my head, I'm not Rob Spalton. I wasn't living up to my own expectation. Now that's really, really toxic and has been a real psychological mountain to climb. And I really wish someone had kind of sat me down and said, you're still you, you're still great, regardless of how your chops are working. Look after yourself. I think as musicians, we're really good at kind of setting ourselves kind of a trajectory and getting increasingly frustrated when we're not meeting that trajectory, and the void between these points is kind of ever increasing. You know, spinning a million plates at once can be exhilarating, and it can be overwhelming. When someone says, you know, you're free on the 28th of whatever, you go, yeah, brilliant, not realising you're in Scotland the night before. The pace can be incredibly fast. You've got to book in downtime, and if you really need help, that's totally fine. Go and get help. You are where you are as a result of the actions you've taken. There's no shame in that. You know, if you don't like it, that's fine. Do something about it. Don't be hard on yourself, though, and you mustn't compare yourself to others, as their journeys are totally their own. We're really good at, as musicians, at focusing on the negatives about ourselves, and have generally conditioned ourselves kind of out of celebrating our success. It's weird. It's like a whole arts thing. To be an elite sportsman is amazing. To be an elite musician, no. You don't tell anybody that. Absolutely not. Even rattling off bits of my career portfolio at the start makes me really uncomfortable. Why? It's really cool stuff. You know, if you're an Olympic athlete or a Paralympic athlete, you wouldn't shy away from discussing success. No, of course not. So give yourself a pat on the back wherever you can. And all of these points are totally kind of not as important as the final one, which is just be nice and be kind. As a muso, pretty much every conversation you have is an interview on some level, you know, be they close friends or new acquaintances, and regardless of their place in that great musical journey, we're all still people first and must be treated with kindness and decency. Similarly, positivity goes a really long way, and if you can leave someone feeling happier than they were at the start of your conversation, then everyone wins, and you're far more likely to be that one person that person kind of rings for a gig or passes a number on to for a fixer. You know, if you're in an orchestral pit or teaching in a room next to a really grumpy old chap who wants to be anywhere else, it creates a really toxic atmosphere. And I think we all need to go fighting that wherever we possibly can. You know, 50% of being a musician is just being a good human being to work with. I've not booked people for gigs just because I don't like them. So be nice, be kind, be fun, respectful, be positive. And at times that can feel like a performance. We never want it to be false, but you know, zoom out a bit. We're not stacking shelves here. You're making a living by making music, and that's really cool. I think we should always celebrate that. So in summary, say yes to everything. Have a plan. The plan can flex as needed, but you've got to have a plan, and you can make headway on that wherever possible. invest time in networking, get coffees in the diary and connect with people, reconnect with people. Always know a good dep who isn't quite as good as you. Social media is a bit of a blessing and a curse. Use it as a shop front and upload wisely. Every conversation is an interview. Be authentic. Do you really like cats? Diversify your income as far as possible. Take mental and physical health dead seriously. Schedule in some downtime. And be a human being. Be really, really kind. So I guess I should probably say I'm also the website and insights manager for the Independent Society of Musicians. Haha. So the next question is, where does the ISM fit into all this? Well, I've been an ISM member long before I've been working for this organisation, and I continue to work in a freelance capacity all the time. So as an ISM member, the services I've relied on most are the things like the ridiculously good legal one-to-one, the unlimited legal support from the ISM's in-house team for things like recovering unpaid fees is absolutely vital. Access to physiotherapy, well-being and counselling services, insurances like your public liability insurance, your professional indemnity insurance, these are vital for working in the professional sphere. And contracts, those super snazzy contracts that make you look really professional. And of course you get the snazzy letters after your name as well. And of course Discount Plus as well. I think especially in if I had access to Discount Plus when I was a student, I would be a substantially richer individual. This vast bank of discounts that covers just about everything. So if you want to know any more on that, I'm sure Courtney will put up some links in the chat in a couple of minutes. But in short, as a musician, you need your insurances and that legal support. So as a student, for just 17 quid for the year, or for 57 quid for the year for an early career member, it's an incredible offer. And the other perks just make it an absolute no-brainer. I'm kind of getting poked a little bit here, so I'm going to just accelerate very quickly. I've also been given a couple of questions, which are how to start organising my first band tour and what people do I need in terms of roles. Well, it depends on your act really, but you need to kind of start off by knowing who your audience are and where they are. If you're an originals band, which it sounds like you are, then find successful acts who have a similar sound or vibe, see where they're touring and playing or where they toured last year. And if they're doing an autumn tour, see if you can jump in the same venues in spring. Get in touch with any promoters they use and see if there are any nights that they put on or go on tour about with. The other way of doing it is kind of to look geographically at venues that have a certain capacity within a certain region. So if you're from Birmingham, you might be looking at Brum, Solihull, Coventry, Oxford, Leicester, Derby, Nottingham, Stoke, maybe Chester, maybe Manchester. Try and build an audience base in that region. And from there you can kind of branch out a little bit. Agencies, in my experience, they're a bit of a false god. They usually take a handsome top slice off your fee and often insist that they manage you exclusively and then rarely promote events enough, but that's just my experience. In terms of doing it all yourself, well, you'll always get a better chance in terms of contacting with venues or with people if you have a personal connection. You can always ask acts directly if you can support them or if you know of any venues which worked well for them. We're all kind of keen to keep the live music circuits alive. Hey, our friend in the Destroyers played with you last year, so they suggested I drop you a line for a possible tour date next year is a totally good way to start. Also, having something to sell is really good. We've got a new EP coming out, we want to tour it around a bit. You'll get an awful lot of ignored emails, but that's the kind of way it is, I'm afraid. In terms of what roles do you need specifically? Well, you'll need someone who's happy gig hunting, happy to book in dates and liaise with the venue, handling invoicing, ticket sales, rider stuff in terms of terms and conditions and making sure there's a hot meal. Make sure you've got an electronic press kit, things like a tech spec you can send to the venue ahead of time. You'll need someone on kind of social media who's got their head around things like Meta Business Suite and can engage with fans on socials, drip feeding everything from rehearsals to just straight up chat. Super fans are a thing. They're annoying, but they're here to stay. Yeah, socials and promotion generally, you need to sort transport. You'll either need like a 50-50 splitter or jump in cars or whatever. Book a techie that's either attached to the venue or take your own. Does the venue have a PA? Do they have backline? If it's a hometown gig, you're trying to get a photographer, videographer in to capture loads of promo. Or do you want someone to introduce you? Do you need any of that stuff? In my experience, I wouldn't go hunting for kind of agencies and people until your band's big enough that folks start approaching you. I think I'm better hand back to Ella before I get told off for taking too long. But yeah, be happy to answer any emails if anybody's got a question they want to bung over at some point.
Thank you, Rob. That was really helpful. So we have got a bit of time for a Q&A. So if Dom and Gabby can come back on as well, please. So we've had some pre-submitted questions as well as lots of live ones, which is great. So thank you. And we'll try to get around to as many as we can, but any we don't get around to will be part of our follow-up event, Beyond the Basics, Your Music Industry Questions Answered. So do look out for that one as well. So first, one of our submitted questions we've had during the webinar is, what can we do to learn as much as possible if we are a complete outsider? Does anyone have any top tips for that? Rob?
Go to gigs. Go to everything. Go and hang out with everybody. Just be a nice person. You don't need to be aggressively playing the piano in their face all the time. The fact that you're there is enough. Just go and stand at the back of the room holding a Diet Coke and lemonade, and it'll be great.
Thanks, Rob. And I think that touches on what Gabby was saying earlier as well. And Dom, can I direct this one at you? So someone's asked, how can we increase gig attendance at grassroots rather than just at stadiums?
Well, I mean, if it's your own gig, I mean, some of the stuff that Rob was saying was absolutely bang on. Very much find out who's promoting the gigs in the area that you want to promote the gigs in, and kind of work down the ladder from there, because there's always going to be a grassroots venue somewhere in the mix where even touring artists go to, like, well, before they get big. I remember when, I mean, this is age, well, not age, I mean 2013 I think, or 14, Sam Smith, this is just before he dropped that really big song, lay with me or something like that, Lay by Your Side, and he was at like a pub in Manchester. So there's a circuit that exists that we have to kind of tap into. And if you're doing things your own, I mean, if you got the capital and you got enough money saved to pay for promotion and ads and for a marketing team, that is the best way to get word out to people in the community, because there's such an oversaturation of everything. If you can get a good solid ad and put a good spend on it, it will pay for itself.
Great, thank you. And Gabby, can I send this one your way? So, how do I break into paid session work from free work?
Okay, well, it's a sort of age-old question, because you want to also make sure that the industry is progressing, and make sure that you're leaving a legacy of work for musicians who will be in the same situation as you in sort of 10 years' time. But I think music college is definitely the time to keep saying yes, even if it's just sort of expenses. Hopefully, when you start sort of getting out there a bit more, you can judge these things. I think there's always going to be something that you really want to do and something you should be paid to do. And the profession should be quite good at making it clear about what it's offering. It's a tricky one, because even I know wind players, for example, where orchestral opportunities aren't always there professionally early on. It's very easy to say yes to amateur orchestras, and actually you're going to be getting really good experience of playing, first flute in a big symphony, for example. But there, of course, comes a time where things really do have to be paid. And I think you have to use what will be then your skills for life, and about sort of judging these things and thinking, well, is this going to be a grower? Is this going to be contacts in the future where we can actually, go on and create a project together? Or am I just doing this complete random a favor and I'm not actually really going to benefit anything from it? So I think there are some things I would definitely say yes to, but just try and see the long game for sure, and think, will I be benefiting from this or in the future?
Yeah, no, thank you, Gabby. And Dom, this one was sent through during your sort of section, so I think this is kind of going your way. But they asked, what steps did you take in order to change career paths? Is doing a master's recommended? So they're a BA music production and music business student, but want to change to music journalism.
Okay. Well, for me, I had diversified from a young age, so I did a lot of different things, and I was also teaching as well. So I had a few options in front of me that I've already kind of, made some connections in and started kind of get my foot in the door in those different professions. Um, I would say the best thing to do is to do your research, be as prepared as possible, use what you've learned from your current thing that you're doing and transfer as many of those skills over as possible. What's great about music is that it's such a broad umbrella, but there's a lot of things that are related to each other that we can definitely cherry pick ideas from or sensibilities from. A master's, for me, I mean, a master's in terms of what I did at popular music, is what I made of it. Honestly, I went in there thinking I was going to get some kind of educational epiphany that kind of never really materialized in the way I thought it would. But because I saw that I wasn't really getting that in the way I wanted to, and I was aware that it costs so much money, I then used my time to really milk the resources that were going to be available to me for the next year, 2 years, which are definitely not that readily available or cheap when you leave an institution like a music college. So I would say, yes, do a master's. It's never a bad thing if you're unsure about what career path to take, especially to give yourself some time that's also spent still learning and applying, your brain to something at a high level. But beware, I'd say, it is what you make of it. They're not watching you like they are in undergrad. They're not holding your hand as much for sure. But if you want to make use of the resources, then it is a great thing to do.
Hi.
Yeah,
Uh,
Gabby.
Can I just add, because Dom made such a good point there, I don't think any of us have really covered it. Whilst you're at music college, remember you are the guys that are paying the institutions. It's that way round. If you're not happy with your teacher, if you're not getting enough opportunities, if someone's like, not treated you particularly well in a rehearsal, a conductor, whatever, it's their responsibility to sort this stuff out. The amount of times that I wished I'd kind of thought, okay, I should actually speak up for myself. It's really, really important. So remember, you're paying for services that they should be providing. And if you're not getting them, get sorted out now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I think we've probably just got time for one final question to go to all of you, if that's all right. So, it's what do you think is the most important thing to focus on as an artist right now and why? So I know that's a tough one, but it'd be interesting to hear. So Rob, can we go to you first?
Play what you want to play, not what other people play what you want to play, not what you think other people want you to play.
Yeah, thank you.
Concise.
Dom?
Practice, practice, practice. Whatever it is that you do, whether it's songwriting, whether it's producing, whether it's journalism, practice your craft, even if it's for nobody and it ends up going nowhere. I think to do every day, chip away at the 10,000 hours, is the best thing you can do to prepare yourself for any opportunity that comes your way.
Excellent, thank you. Gabby, yeah.
Just to follow up, I think Rob made a great point about the trumpet on the mouth thing. It's the same I get opening that case every day, the cello case. And if you're taking that instrument out and you're playing or working, you are being a musician. If it stays at home, if it's going out, don't ever feel that you're not part of this community. And being an ISM member, massive plug here, you are part of the body and we all care about each other very much. So keep with us and you'll be fine.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Rob, Gabby, and Dom, for that extremely useful session. And thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope you found this session informative and useful. And if you have any other questions, please do email us on membership@ism.org and we can help out there. And please let us know in the chat now any other topics that you'd like us to cover for any future events. And the recording of this event will be sent to you by email, along with some more information about the ISM and some of the bits that our speakers have spoken about, and also how you could join. Independent Society. So our next event is on the 27th of November. And as I mentioned, this will be a follow-up session answering your questions on the industry and covering the questions that we didn't have time for today. So we've got all of those that we can use next time. So please do sign up for that if you're interested. And yes, so finally, may I thank you for joining us and for watching, and we hope to see you at another ISM event soon. Goodbye.